Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. I apologize because we have changed a little bit our presentation. I introduced the speakers, Professor Johannes, he is director of the Institute of Biological Control of JKI, Germany. He is responsible for the generation of planted crops. Martín Torres Díaz is a researcher from the Buenos Aires University. He is responsible for biological evaluation of a group in Aapresid, and Federico Rivas, he's a researcher and expert in bioinputs from Uruguay and coordinator in precision work. This panel is a continuation of the panel that we presented yesterday that had to do with the inputs. That workshop and this panel is organized by Argentina, Germany, and Uruguay dialogues that are international cooperation agreements, Germany with Uruguay and Germany with Argentina. The idea is to work on the development of bioinputs as an alternative for food production in South America and Europe. Yesterday's workshop had two modules. One had to do with the technical scientific part, and the second part that had to do with registrations, regulations, etc. Today's panel is telling you what things we pointed out yesterday, and speakers today can expand a little bit more what the situation is like in each of our countries. We started to talk about funding and infrastructure. These are one of the pillars on which we are expected to work. So the question is, I'm not a researcher. I have never been in the research area. I have always working in extension, really, and when I listen that there's money missing for extension, we see that multinational companies on chemical synthesis today have an department dedicated to biologics. Are we missing the budget for research, or research does not know how to sell the project to the private sector? The first question, Professor Jehle, can you tell us how things are around this in Germany, please?
Okay, yeah. Welcome and thank you very much for being here. I apologize for not speaking Spanish, but I will try to do my best in English. Yeah, we had a very, I think, interesting discussion yesterday about also the differences between South America and Germany. And what I learned from here is there are kind of bio-input strategies. So this is something we are not having in Germany. But we have different strategies in Germany, and Germany is a part of the European Union, and it must be very clear that. Could you close? I can hear me very well. Okay. Thank you. So Germany is a part of the European Union, and most of the activities we are doing in Germany are of course embedded in the policy of the European Union. You may have heard about the farm-to-fork strategy, which is a very important strategy to reduce chemical fertilizers, to reduce the use of chemical pesticides, and to go towards what is here. The phrase is bioinputs, so we are talking about biocontrol agents. Using biocontrol is one thing, and on the other thing also about the biostimulants, which is a quite new category for Europe. It's only now in the fertilizing product regulations since about 2 years, and we are learning now to integrate biostimulants in practice, but also for the regulatory things. In terms of science, of course, if the direction is given, the funding is given, we have many programs from the European Union, but also in the federal scheme, like the federal organic scheme. We have different strategies, the arable crop strategy, the protein crop strategy, and here funding is given by the government but also by the European Union. Okay.
Thank you, gracias. Sí, vamos con Uruguay y con...
What about Uruguay? Can you share with us your point of view? Can you hear me? Thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel. I want to thank Argentina, Uruguay, and Aapresid regarding your question about funding. Financing is always necessary because we are talking about products that have to be continuously developed, that have to face new challenges and new changes. Today we are facing a huge challenge, which is climate change. And this implies having studies analysis and all the new pests and emerging diseases means that we have to be ahead of what's happening. We have to anticipate to situation. Therefore, funding is important, but it's also true that in most of the institutes and universities, they are aware of this, but we are missing is the spontaneous step of going into the industry to produce things on scale, to get closer to farmers and to be able to train. So what needs funding is training, large-scale production, the implementation of public policies. So I believe that financing, and as we identified in our working group, has to be devoted to those areas. The other question is where there is missing connection between companies and research. I believe this is the case. I don't think that researchers are not trained in order to have this basic link with the industry. When you finish your university and you go out there, or you rather go to a research institute or you go to the industry, you deal with IP, large-scale productions, and the situation, the limitations are completely different in one place and the other. So I think that we are missing that links. I think that university have to train, or funding has to be used to train people in these areas. Can we close the door? I want to add that to couple the public system and the private system beyond the money, I think that the public policies in the long term is the way we have to follow. We know that there has been a reduction in funds. It is difficult to get people to adopt these technologies if the scientific ecosystem we need to maintain this in time, and we need to promote the public-private interactions so that scientists are part of the businesses, but in the good sense. Because sometimes people have a bias that talking about money is not a good thing. Scientists are part of the startups. They work with startups. I think that we have to think in this way. In Argentina, we have good sciences, so we are facing challenges because we have low funding. There is a scientific tradition in Argentina. There is a lot to be done in terms of the interaction, private-public interaction, and coming up with businesses so that the industry can leverage their potential, and so we can see more adoption, more uptaking. So we need to bear in mind what the public policies are. What we did in the past is we have to show that there is a problem, and in the lab we have all the possibility to do the scientific development. We come to the practical part and they tell me, no, the formulation that you are proposing cannot be taken into practice. I think that in the early stages of research, we have to talk with farmers, with the industry, how we can face this problem together and coming up with a final solution that is real, not to fall in love with a solution that then you cannot put in place in practice. I agree with what you are saying. I agree that we need to make up working groups, not only public and private, but also within the private sector to have to bring people, multidisciplinary people. Those people who are technicians, who are technicals, don't know how to sell ourselves, and the people from the commercial side needs to have more technical knowledge. So I think that funding has to go to training. As professionals, as university professionals, we don't learn anything about biological products. Until a short time ago, there was no curricula for no-till in the university. So what do you propose? How would we train the technicians and the experts who are the ones who, in the end, are going to sell to the farmers the biological product? What happens in Germany? How do farmers adopt technology or biological products?
In Germany, I think the farmers are very, very open for new technologies and they are adopting quite well. Of course, it's very important that also the extension service people are knowing what to do, what is the character of these new products, how does the growing system has to be changed to adopt these new technologies. This is very important. And then also at the universities, we have a kind of a development more towards basic research, also in the agricultural universities. So there's more done on basic research and less done on, let's say, practical approaches. But I think it's very important that we not only try to do basic research and then hoping that something will trickle down, also going into the practice, because the problems are in the field, and I think we have to take up the problems in the field and transfer it back to research, so that we get a combination of, on one side, the knowledge which may come from the university, but also on the experience which may come from the farmers or from the growers, so that we work together and have a kind of a participative working schedule, so that just the different stakeholders are knowing their role and that they can work together solving problems, and I think that's the most important thing.
Yo quería sumar con respecto a lo que es la Argentina, que ayer lo conversamos con bastante detalle, que en realidad la adopción de...
I want to add what happens in Argentina. The adoption of that technology is influenced in Argentina by different factors, restrictions that the farmer experiences, economy, land tenure. There are critical moments and economic factors. When you analyze adoption, we need to consider what other technologies we need to adopt first, how nutrition and fertility improves beyond the no-till acreage. We need to know the fertility processes. We are not doing a good homework from that point of view. We want to explain the farmers that they need to work on specific inputs. We don't need to work in isolation with only one input. I think that we need to have a more comprehensive approach, because we are investing a lot of money in science and technology. I would also use this money in training sales forces and companies to train people from the INTA and from the universities, try to have universities more closely connected to rural extension. Sometimes there is a detachment between universities and the INTA, the Technological Institute, Agricultural and Technological Institute, and research. We are talking about a technological and social issue. Sometimes we disregard all these factors that have to do with the restrictions faced by farmers. We are not seeing the whole picture. We need money to reduce this, not only yield gaps, but only to close the knowledge gaps. Why this is not getting to the practice? We need to think of how we can get science to reach the practice. I can't add too much about what Martin said. We know that training is central. Today we are experiencing a change in the way of planting and the way of producing, and inputs are complex by itself. Those who are knowledgeable about this topic, who participate in these and other panels, know that this is a complex problem. I think that companies need to provide training because they want to sell their products. If the farmer does not receive the explanation that he cannot apply this at midday or cannot apply that product when it is very hot, the product won't work. Something that is missing also, at least in Argentina and in Uruguay, in the curricula of science, in agronomics and veterinary, or any other areas related to agriculture, there are no courses. There's no training or learning about biological control. So I think that there is an important gap in the training of professionals as regards inputs, and this is very necessary. We need technical people, experts in the field that can give advice to the farmers. So I think that it's a very important area, training. Yesterday we talked a lot on putting the focus on the scientific side in the university. We want to have a good science because we can have good or bad science. I think that science has, practice have to be based, or findings have to be based in scientific evidence. The farmer needs to know that the effects of biological products are not huge, are not perfect, that they are not always the same. They will depend on the kind of soil or on other features. So we have different products with different components, and probably the teachers, the professors in the university cannot catch up with the new things that come in research. Higher postgraduate training is important. Postgraduate courses, master's courses. I want to point out the fact that this is not one way. This does not come from the academy, from the academy, to the company and to the farmer. It has to go also bottom up, because the climate facts, the characteristics of the field, the characteristics of the plant require different approaches. So we will be able to improve if we have a feedback from the farmer, so we can improve what we research and what we find. And that can be very beneficial to improve the cultivars, for example, or the inputs. So I think that this would help us solve problems.
Están comenzando a entrar preguntas que justamente algunas ya las...
We're starting to get questions. Some have already been answered, but we, the members of this panel, may all have our own ideas, and it also depends on where we are in the chain, whether we're technical people, researchers, scientists, but you as researchers and as representatives of your own countries. Yesterday, we talked about the need to understand biological products as supplements and not as replacement of chemical synthesis products. Martin, you said that many biological products are also chemical products if we get into more detail. But what do you think about the following? What should be the approach to biological products considering the complex agricultural and cattle breeding systems, which we know is not simple? Johannes, what do you think about this? So the first question.
Yes, Lord.
So the idea is the following. Yesterday, we were talking in our panel about the fact that you need to understand biological products or to see them as a complement of chemical synthesis products, not as replacements. I'm talking about that. You as researchers, how do you see these products and what is your advice?
I got the question, thank you. The biological control agents, they're very diverse and they have a lot of diverse functioning too. So, and some of them can be easily combined with chemicals, others cannot be combined, or it's more complicated to be combined. So what we are needing is a kind of a system for each crop actually, also then for the pests. I can give you examples. For example, we are having systems in Germany on tomato protection. They don't need any chemicals for insecticides because everything can be done with beneficials. So you need to consider the crop, you need to consider the pest complex and the disease complex which is there, and then you need to combine what is available. And this is not a general answer, so you need to really to consider each specific crop. I think this is very important. You mentioned already that biologicals may not be able to replace chemicals. This is quite clear because the chemicals in general, they are interventive, they have a very fast action. Biologicals would have a lower action, this is one point, but I think it is much more important to reduce the disease pressure, to reduce the pest pressure by generating resilient systems where this disease and pest pressure is not getting high. And this is something you can achieve with biologicals, for example. So, and this is more important than having a product which is fast acting. So if you are in general having a low pest and disease pressure, so this is much better and much more sustainable than acting very quickly with very strong chemicals.
Solo un comentario.
Johannes was talking about biocontrol. When you think there are some organisms that do biocontrol, so we're seeing increasing synergies, those of us who work on biostimulation and biocontrol. My comment is that we first have to understand what biostimulants do. And based on what they do, we can think how to position them. There is no ex-ante definition. This will supplement or this will replace. It depends on the use. I'd like to point out that in general terms, biostimulants stimulate. They have microbials or non-microbials. They have different mode of actions. They are going to biostimulate. So in some cases where we're using lots of nutrients, we can in a way replace partly this, what we're seeing in other countries, Europe, the US. It depends on soil fertility. It is risky to think of replacing nutrients with a biostimulant in soils that really lack nutrients. This is why the response to biostimulants depends on the site, on soil fertility, and this is very important. We have to see the combined effects that we're getting with biostimulants and fertilizers and nutrients, because in some cases we can see a synergy where the biological product will help me mitigate the stress, the abiotic stress mostly, or do biocontrol, as Johannes was saying. But it is very difficult to use only biological products when we have lots of things missing in the soil? Yes, I just believe that not using chemical products or supplementing biological products, that depends on every case. It's a case-by-case analysis. If we're talking about biostimulants and in plant nutrition, we do need the nutrients in the soil. Sometimes they are there, but they cannot be assimilated by the plant, and that's when biological products help the plant to assimilate those nutrients. And it might be necessary to use less phosphorus, for example, with a phosphorus solubility agent, and we will have a better performance. In the case of rhizobia, I think it is not necessary to add it because it will get nitrogen from the soil, and you can promote the nitrogen from the insect into the plant by association with the rhizosphere. And it also depends on what pest levels we want to have. If we want to have 0 level of a certain pest, then we have to apply lots of chemical products, biocontrollers. Let's say we have bed bugs and we want to do away with them. In other cases, you may not have to use so many chemical products. And to sum up, we know that biochemicals and biocontrollers are compatible in some cases, and they have better effect than if they are applied separately. So the goal is to reduce the use of chemical products. Martin, would you like to share with us what you are doing with chakras and the Biological Research Center? There are questions for Johannes. There's another question for the panel, but can you please first share what you are doing before we run out of time? Sure. I just want you to know that we're working here in the Biologic Nutrition Network with Aapresid. Ramiro will be showing the slides. I want you to know that the goal of this network is mostly to bring to growers many of the things we mentioned today, science-based information about bioinputs, biostimulants, biofertilizers, and this is what is missing. There is a lot of information that is not always based on the evidence we're seeing in the scientific field. So this is the goal. This thematic network works within the framework of the chakras system. You can see all the components of that system there. Growers who carry out the field test with microplots, with the repetition, without repetition, but always with a pseudo repetition. We try to do this as best as possible. There are lots of logistic challenges, and there are also experts and the companies that kindly support and fund this thematic network. We're carrying out over 40 experiments every year, including wheat, corn, and soybean. This is an experimental module. It is not a trial network. It's a space to do these things, to have discussions, talk to growers, bring them information, bring advices on microbiology or biology. This is not my case. I come from the field of nutrition, fertility. I coordinate the projects academically so as to add academic rigor to our projects and to generate valuable information. That's my role. And achieve synergy so that this will work and so that this will add value to growers. That's the general idea. That was my message. And if there are more questions, I'll be happy to answer them, or otherwise you can also send us an email. There's a question for Johannes. Which was the main factor that encouraged the adoption of biologicals in EU countries? And what do growers think about the information about these new biologic alternatives?
Yeah, it's working. I think there are different factors. Of course, there is a kind of a societal demand for having food with less residues. This is actually a development which is already for many years, and actually we had retailers setting their own residue levels which were much more stronger than we had it on the legal base. So this was a very important development in the past. Now we are having the farm-to-form strategy. We are having the Actually, we have the Sustainable Use Directive, which is from 2011, which also expected from the different EU countries putting up national action plans to reduce the use of chemicals. This is going now also into a further regulation in the future. But in general, it's the demand of the consumers to having food produced which is less, has less residues on chemicals, which is more sustainably produced, and we have also a development towards more organic farming. We have in the European Union, we have national organic plans. In Germany, we have the political aim having organic farming on 30% until 2030.
Gracias.
Thank you. There is a question for all members of the panel. It is clear that researchers are not sellers, but the question is, how would you position a biological product in the market today so that it will be adopted by growers? Understanding that it is species dependent and that it is not stable in time. I'd like to say that besides being a researcher, I'm a consultant and I work with growers and with companies that sell and position products. So I am familiar with the different environments. I think the best thing that a company can do to position any product or service is to have a value proposal that is appropriate. This, unfortunately, implies running experiments during many years and throughout many sites. The only way to assess at field level, starting with a laboratory scale, of course, all that sequence you have to go through. The only thing you have to do is to be clear about the mode of action of that input. That has to be scientifically determined. You cannot fail to know what the product does. You need to have a general mode of action. I'm not talking about a chemical mechanism, but you do need a mode of action, and you need to carry out several experiments in several sites over several years to know what the minimum, mid, and maximum effect is. That's the basic information you need. I absolutely agree with you. From a scientific point of view, and depending on how we work at INIA, we don't sell anything. We just provide solutions to growers. So if we have a grower's demand regarding a certain pest or crop yield, our goal is to get there and to provide a solution to that grower. The ones who sell are the companies, and that's when we need public-private partnerships so that that solution will reach growers, which is what we're interested in, or consumers. And this is what Martin says. In Argentina, we have been studying Aspergillus for decades. Years of research published in scientific journals that show the effect, moderate effect. Based on my experience, in terms of biostimulants, the effects are usually more moderate than what we see in the nutritional field. The effect may be a mean around 6, 7, or 8%. In time, variability is higher, and you always have to take into account that you need to be careful when you do field assessment. You need to have an experimental design that will help you detect 3 or 4% effects, because usually growers will say, I see nothing in the field. But sometimes if you have a 15% effect, you don't see it either. Effects are sometimes quite modest and cannot be detected in the field. And the only way to improve this is to run more experiments that are better managed and try to understand that variability and see what it is due to. There is another question.
The German perspective. My experience is that, of course, the scientists do not know too much about the economic needs, and they do not know too much about the regulatory needs. So I think the good strategy is to work very early together with companies, because they will tell you very early whether a product is going to the market, if there is a market, and if there is a return of investment. And we have very good programs in Europe working together or funding research together with SMEs or also with bigger companies. And these are national programs, but also European programs, and I think this is very important.
Bien, y un poco en relación a lo que...
And along the same line, there is a question about whether the inclusion of biological agents in the EU led to increased production costs, higher production costs.
Yeah, if you only look at the production, there might be an increase of costs because, of course, the products might be more expensive, and if you go into organic farming, also the yield might be reduced. But what we are not considering also is the external costs which are used by the current or conventional production systems. And I think if you include also these kind of external costs, then in long term using biologicals can be more sustainable than the current production system.
Otra pregunta para...
There's another question for all members of the panel. Are there developments focusing on microorganisms that will improve the soil rather than focusing on the plant, which is the most usual thing? The question is whether there are studies or microorganisms. Microorganisms, yes. The use of microorganisms improves the soil microbiome. Sometimes it's a non-chemical effect. We know that chemical products reduce microorganism populations both in the plant and on the soil. So sometimes maybe it's not just one specific microorganism, but the use of this technology that helps the soil to have a better microorganism population. Same thing with the plant. Last question, because we're running out of time. When adding nutrients through fertilizers, will the nutrient microbiological cycles become reduced or not? I think I will get in trouble here. I follow what is promoted by IFA International, which is a responsible nutrition panel. And this shows that if you apply the principles of good management of nutrients with a diagnosis, balanced nutrition, and if that leads to an increase of organic matter. There are several studies carried out in Argentina, and we see that in fertilized systems with traditional products, microbial activity improves, biological rates improve. But sometimes when you take a look at the biojoyous cycle, you may see the specific effect of a biofertilizer. I mean, this question should be answered considering a very specific case. In general terms, what I think is that if you manage a nutrition and biostimulation program that is balanced and that uses PGPR, then the soil should improve. But if you only use chemical fertilizers, so to speak, with an excess of nitrogen, which is what is happening in Europe, then there will be a reduction in that microbial activity related to the biojoyous cycle of nitrogen. If there is an excess, you will be in trouble. But if there is no excess, you might be okay.
I think generations of farmers, but also generations of scientists were taught about Liebig's law of the minimum, which said, okay, if there is one nutrient, the minimum, this is in the end will control the growth of the plant. But I think, of course, it's not wrong, but we are now only understanding the function of the microorganisms, and the microorganisms have not been in the center of thinking, in the center of consideration in the last, let's say, decades. And this is something which is new, but of course the soil is a living organism and it gives nutrition to the plants. And if the soil is not working in the right way, I think the plants cannot grow healthy. And this is now what we are understanding, that we have to focus on the soil, on the soil microbiome.
Sí,
Estamos mal de tiempo, ¿no?
ya antes de agradecer a los panelistas, y se nos fue el tiempo.
Before thanking the members of the panel, since we're running out of time, I'd like to say that I think there is a new topic coming out, and that is a need to integrate not only the private and the public sector, but all the different sectors, all the different roles we play, growers, technical people, extension people, researchers, from the public and the private sector, because we all can contribute something. In the field, we see the problems, and maybe the solutions that are sought at the lab are not the solutions that can be applied in the field. So I think we can make better use of the money if we work together. So thank you all. Thank you for having been with us. Thank you, Aapresid, for focusing on this topic, and within Germany, Argentina, Uruguay, and Argentina, we will keep on working together to have more tools for production. Thank you very much.